the 2300-day prophecy, and the rebuilding of the third temple. Hello, brothers and sisters. This is Ann, and today I want to talk to you about the 2300-day prophecy and the third temple. I also want to briefly talk about the timeline of events related to the next 7 years, which I believe is the 70th week of Daniel. It is the final week of this age. There is a prophecy which deals with the temple of God that not many people speak of today, but this is a very important prophecy for us to understand in these days and times. This prophecy is called the 2300-day prophecy and is found in the book of Daniel, chapter 8, verses 13 and 14. It is called the 2300-day prophecy, but most people who attempt to teach it teach that it is really a 2300-year prophecy. Now, there is no indication that this prophecy is speaking of years, when it clearly says that it's talking about days. People just got things confused. But remember, Daniel was told to seal up the book until the time of the end, and he was especially told this about this particular prophecy. That's mentioned in Daniel 8, verse 17. That means that any interpretation of this prophecy and any application of this prophecy that happened before the end of days, which now we are living in, has to be wrong. Because you see, God is the one who sealed up the thing until now. And now that we are at the time of the end, it is time to talk about this prophecy. And that is what I will be talking about, explaining in this video. Now let's take a look at the 2300-day prophecy in the Bible. We will be looking at Daniel chapter 8, verses 9 to 14. The actual prophecy is in verse 13 and 14. But please read the whole chapter for yourself to get a good and complete context of the prophecy. I will give you a summary of chapter 8. Daniel chapter 8 tells of Daniel's vision of a battle between a two-horned ram and a one-horned goat. The one-horned goat is the predecessor of the little horn who is to come and who we call the Antichrist today. The vision represents the history of the Medes and the Persians kingdom, Russia and Iran. Who is the ram? Okay, Russia and Iran is called that ram. The goat kingdom is the Greek kingdom. We are looking at these kingdoms as they relate to Israel. It is believed that the little horn will rise from one of the four horns of the divided Alexander the Great kingdom, which is the Greek kingdom. It is true that long ago there was this person by the name of Antiochus Epiphanes, who was a fulfillment of the vision during his reign of terror. And yes, we should look at what he did and understand what happened during that time so that we can know what's in the future for us. Now, even though he was a fulfillment of the vision almost to a T, it did not meet the requirements for the fulfillment, because in Daniel chapter 8, verse 17, Daniel was told that this particular vision was going to happen at the end of time. And Antiochus' reign did not happen at the end of time. So even though these things happened during his reign and during his day, they did not happen at the end of the age. Therefore, this vision will be repeated, and we will see exactly the same things that are listed in the vision. We must understand this 2300-day prophecy, because this prophecy is getting ready to actually happen very, very soon. Now let's read Daniel chapter 8, starting with verse 9 through 14. We'll just kind of read through that. Okay, Daniel chapter 8, verse 9. And out of one of them came forth a little horn, which waxed exceedingly great toward the south, and toward the east, and toward the pleasant land. 10. And it waxed great even to the host of heaven, and it cast down some of the host and the stars to the ground, and stomped upon them. 11. Yea, he magnified himself even to the prince of hosts, and by him the daily sacrifice was taken away, and the place of the sanctuary was cast down. 12. And host was given him against the daily sacrifice by reason of transgression, and it cast down the truth to the ground. 13. And here's where the actual prophecy comes in. 13. Then I heard one saint speaking, and another saint said unto that certain saint which spake, How long shall be the vision concerning the daily sacrifice and the transgression of desolation, to give both the sanctuary and the host to be trodden under foot? And he said unto me, Unto 2,300 days, then shall the sanctuary be cleansed. Let's look a little closer at this text. The first saint is looking for a measure of time. How long is the vision? He wanted to know. And then you may say, well, what vision? Well, the vision of the ram and the goat that we just spoke about as it relates to the land of Israel. The temple of God, as it relates to the land of Israel, the temple of God, the daily sacrifice, and the saints of the Most High being trodden underfoot. In other words, them going through tribulation. It looks like the text, if we go back and look at the text in verse 9 to 12, basically explains what we're looking for in this vision, because that is the vision. And so we know that this vision, the time frame that we're looking for, is 2,300 days. That's the length of the prophecy. As I said before, the things in this vision happened during the reign of Antiochus Epiphanes over 3,000 years ago. But because of the fact that that time was not the end of time, it did not meet Daniel's requirement in chapter 8:17. Even though it appears that this is a historical prophecy, it did not, that time in history did not fulfill the requirements of the vision. That means that these things are to come, and they're going to be coming very soon. The saint is asking, how long is this time period that we are looking for? Well, that they are looking for. We see that both a temple, it's going to have to be involved, because he's looking for the temple to be trodden. It looks like the daily sacrifices are going to have to be started up, so we know an altar is going to have to be built, and none of those things exist today. This will happen in the future, and that means that this temple that we're looking for is going to have to be rebuilt, and is going to then be desecrated by the little horn, who is also called the Antichrist. So what am I saying? I'm saying that a new temple will be built or rebuilt, and the daily sacrifices will be started up again, and then they will be stopped by the Antichrist. This vision, the answer to the question, how long is it going to be? Well, we know that it's going to be 2,300 days. And brothers and sisters, 2,300 days is roughly about 6 years and 6.4 years. We know that it couldn't be talking about Antiochus Epiphanes because he reigned about 3,000 years ago. So again, that lets us know that all of this is going to happen in the future, and it's going to be coming up very, very shortly. Okay, let's take a look at this prophecy on a 7-year timeline. And I say 7-year timeline because I believe that we have entered into the final 7 years of this age. This time period is sometimes called the last 7 years of the Daniel 70-week prophecy. I believe that that time started on the Feast of Trumpets this past 2023. Yes, I believe that it started this year. That means that all the time prophecies must be fulfilled within the last 7 years of within the last 7 years, or around 2030. At that point, I believe that Yahushua will return to this earth in power and glory, and he will set up his millennial reign as King of Kings of this earth. So now let's take a look at this slide, and I hope it helped to clarify some things. I have another slide that we'll look at just a little bit later, but I want to look at this one first to get sort of an overview. This slide, as I said, is a 7-year timeline, and it's divided into the first 3.5 years, which again started in September 2023, which is the Feast of Trumpets, I believe, and the last 3.5 years, which is what we know as the Great Tribulation. We see that we have the third temple. Now let's look at the first half. We see that we have, on this timeline, we see that we have the third temple and the altar being built during the first 3.5 years. And we have the daily sacrifice being started up during that time. Now you will be able to see how I came up with this when we kind of get to the next slide. But we have these things, as I said, the building of the temple, the building of the altar, and the setting up the daily sacrifice. We have that on this timeline as starting during the first 3.5 years. In other words, from September 2023 to 3.5 years from this point. Okay. In the following slide, the slide is just a high level, as I said, representation that will occur, of things that will occur or events that will occur over the next 7 years. As you can see, we have the following things listed on this timeline. Now, we're not going to talk about all of these things. We're going to put our focus on what happens in the 300-day prophecy, but we're just wanting you to get an overview of the things that's going to be happening for this whole next 7 years. We'll briefly go over those. We have the Revelation 12 woman fleeing to the wilderness. We have the Antichrist. It's going to come to power. Now, these are things that's going to happen during the second half. We have the Revelation woman flee into the wilderness. We have the Antichrist. It's going to come to power. We have the two witnesses that are going to prophesy. We have the saints are actually going to be persecuted. We have the holy city is going to be trampled underfoot, because by that time we'll have the temple. And then we know that at the 1290-day period, which is actually part of the second tribulation, we're going to have the daily sacrifices going to be stopped. We have the abomination of desolation that's going to be set up, and we're going to have the real Great Tribulation is going to begin. It's not going to start in the first half. The Great Tribulation actually start in the second half of this 7 year. And as I said in this slide, it represents a general list of things that will happen over the next 7 years. So, and now we're going to move on to the next slide. Okay, the next slide contains the 2300-day prophecy timeline. It is at the bottom of the general 7-year timeline, which is listed at the top. So let's look at what we know about the 2300-day prophecy. Okay, we are told in Scripture that the time frame for this prophecy is 2300 days. And then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Okay, we know that 2300 days is roughly about 6.38 or 6.4 years. The 6.38 years fits nicely within the 7-year period on the timeline that we just mentioned. We know that a third temple will be built because we see that in the prophecy itself. And it plays a very important role in the prophecy. So there has to be a temple. But we still do not know exactly when the daily sacrifices will start, nor do we know when the third temple will be built. These are the things that we must be watching out for, because even though we know that they will start or they will be built during the first 3.5 years of the 7 years, we don't have an exact time for that, but they have to be before the Great Tribulation start. We see that after 2,300 days, we have the term, then the sanctuary will be cleansed. Now, I believe that sanctuary being cleansed is another term for meaning that is a feast day, and that feast day is a day of atonement. Now, I believe that because of that, Christ will return to this earth in power and glory on a day of atonement. That's what, I don't know if we can say that we know that, but that's what I'm saying. Okay, these are the things that we know. But as I said, I do not know exactly when the daily sacrifices will start up, because that depends on the temple being built and also the altar being built. However, we know that we we know that if we subtract 2,300 days from 7 years of days, we will get 220 days. And if you look at the timeline, that period of time is represented by that oval block at the very beginning of the 2,300-day timeline. Now, if you consider the Feast of Trumpets of 2023 and then add this number, it will take us roughly to the Feast of Passover in the following year of 2024. Now, what does that mean? Well, I'm not exactly sure, but I thought that was very interesting when I found that out. So, so in other words, they are 220 days different from the 6.38 years and the 7 year is our main timeline. Now, when the temple, now back to when the temple will be built, we will assume that since we have some very important events that are dependent on the presence of the temple and the altar, we know that the temple has to be built and in place before the Great Tribulation, and it has to be before the Antichrist can actually walk into the temple and defile it. So we believe that because of that, the temple and the altar has to be built during the first 3.5 years. To say it another way, the temple and the altar must be built during the first 1260 days of the 7 year period if the events of the Great Tribulation are to occur according to the 2300-day prophecy. Now, that seems realistic to me as far as time, because the Great Tribulation will occur in the last 3.5 years of the 7 year time period. In addition, we look at Revelation chapter 11, verse 1 and 2, and we see that both the altar and the temple are present. And we know the book of Revelation represents everything in the New Testament phase. In other words, it kind of rules out Antiochus Epiphanes. And plus, we see that there is a temple there. Also, we see that we have Israelites worshiping in the temple, and the Gentiles must be still in charge because they are still trampling over, because at that point, the scripture says that the outer court is given to the Gentile, and they will still be trampling over our holy city. So for that reason, we know that there will be a temple. So this is during the Great Tribulation too, because it talks about the fact that they will trample over it for the 42 months, which is the same as 3.5 years. The 2300-day prophecy begins when the temple is built and the daily sacrifices get started up. We know it has to start up during the first 3.5 years, and that is what we must be watching out for. The prophecy continues through the Great Tribulation, and it ends when Christ returns in power and glory on the Day of Atonement. And so that's basically what we know concerning the 2300-day prophecy. So now let me try to summarize what I have been saying as succinctly as I can. And I'm going to do this in bullet points, and I will provide a slide for you so that you can see what these summary points are. 1. There will be a third temple rebuilt in the land of Israel. 2. The third temple will be a rebuilt temple, which means that it will be built on the original site of the first temple. 3. The temple will be rebuilt by the sons of Israel and not the Jewish people, who are impostors and who are of the synagogue of Satan. 4. The daily sacrifices will resume and be allowed to continue for a while until it is taken away by the Antichrist himself. 5. The Antichrist will discontinue the daily sacrifice and set himself up in the temple. This is called the Abomination of Desolation. 6. All of this will occur during the last 7 years of this age. The countdown of the last 7 years has already started, and it began at the Feast of Trumpets 2023. Number 7, the temple will be built during the first half of the 7 years, and the actual start date of the daily sacrifices will provide us with the starting point of the prophetic timeline for the 2300 days. The Great Tribulation will occur during the second half of the 7 years, and will be the most difficult time that has ever been known to man. Number 8, when we see the daily sacrifices set up, we must be aware of that. That date will allow us to predict when the King of Kings will return. Also, we will be able to obtain other very important events from that first date. Number 9, that is why we need to be on the lookout for the building of the temple and the starting of the daily sacrifice. Okay, those are the points that I have, and that is all that I have for now, and I will say shalom until the next time. If you have any questions, please let me know, and I'll try to do my best to get you a response. Shalom.